Test.
Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We're going to talk about something very important that none of us like doing, and that's called mobility work. Mobility work isn't new, but the truth of the matter is, back in the day, even those who promoted mobility work promoted it as an adjunct or added to your workout. But we're starting to learn that mobility work possesses a lot of value if you want to remain youthful and young. I remember when Ron Penna came on the show to talk about the passing of his father-in-law, Chet Yorton. One of the things he said to me off air and on air was, if you saw Chet walking in front of you, you would think he was a much younger man. He moved like a younger man. And I think there's a certain suppleness and bounce, maybe we call it swagger, that we possess when we're younger. And as we get older, we kind of get stiff, like wood. And there's a way to keep that from happening. And it will improve the quality of your life as you age. And we're going to talk about those secrets and give you an opportunity to even download an app to help you with it in just a moment. Of course, we have to thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods. Legendary Foods makes snacks that will make you feel guilty for eating them, but you don't have to feel guilty because, like, for instance, the Legendary sweet rolls have 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality protein, 5 net carbs. They come in cinnamon, chocolate, and wild berry. If you're somebody who is past the concession stand where they sell Cinnabons and thought to yourself, I could never eat one of those because that's crap, and now you can enjoy one without the guilt by getting this cinnamon-flavored sweet roll. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10 to let them know that you learned about them here on Superhuman Radio, and shop around. They have lots of other great snacks that will keep you in your lane if you are a low-carb person like me. And without further delay, let's get Dr. Wickham on the show here. How you doing, Dr. Wickham?
I'm doing amazing. How are you doing, Carl?
I'm doing good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfect.
I just realized I look like a real slob. My shirt's all wrinkled. I don't know what's happening to me. I come on the air, I'm unshaven, but it is what it is. At least I'm here. Okay, so we're going to be talking about improving joint mobility. Where does joint mobility begin and where does stretching end? Or how can we talk about the difference between stretching and joint mobility?
Yeah, so that's a great question to start off with. So we can even dive in even a layer deeper. So even thinking about what's the difference between flexibility and mobility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about flexibility, that's what most people associate with stretching. I want to become more flexible. Now, flexibility happens when you stretch out soft tissues such as a muscle or a joint, and then you relax into that stretch. So that would be testing your flexibility. And the difference is there's no active movement in that flexibility piece. It's essentially passive joint movement. And so if we look in life, how many things are we doing passively in life? Not a whole lot, right? So then let's look at mobility. So mobility essentially adds the active component to it. So now we have joint extensibility in a passive fashion. So we're stretching out or moving a joint, but we're doing that with our muscles and with our control. So there's a lot of different components to mobility per se. And so your question was, is there a difference between, working on mobility or flex or stretching? No. If we're doing it correctly, your mobility routine should be your stretching routine and vice versa. So there's numerous different benefits when you are using an effective stretching routine. And that's, part of my message to people is I see people in kind of really two main buckets for the most part, unfortunately. And this is based on, my years of clinical work, as well as working with professional athletes and just general population. Is either one, people unfortunately aren't stretching. And then number two, if they are, they're unfortunately doing the same old stretches that they were doing in high school, middle school. And that comes down to passive stretches.
I can't even do those stretches anymore. I'm so bound up. In fact, it's funny. I'm doing this show partly because for my own purposes, because I have become like, I can't take a towel and get my arms back behind my head because the front heads of my shoulders are just so overpowering, and it's not like I was a big bencher, but I do pay attention to chest work. I pay attention to shoulder work, but for some reason, I feel like my shoulders have rotated forward in the orbital joint, and I need to try to get them passively to stay back further, and I'd have more mobility in my shoulders. So give me an example of mobility versus stretching with this case. We know, like, as runners, we want to stretch our calves, right? We go put our hands against a tree, get far out as possible, get that calf muscle pulled. Now, how do I make that a mobility movement?
Yeah, so I want you to kind of reframe your thinking about stretching and mobility, because really they're the same thing when done effectively. There's passive stretching and then there's active stretching. So again, active stretching there will be an active component to it. So using that example that you just did, and a lot of people are performing this, is you're going up to the for the listeners that can't see this, your hands are against the wall, your back leg's back, and you're stretching out the back of your lower leg, your calf, and you're just relaxing in that. That's a passive stretch.
Right.
So you're just passively lengthening that tissue.
And you're letting it go. You're actually relaxing it as much as possible, maybe even taking the opposing muscle and activating it to get even a better stretch on the soleus and the gastroc. And yes, but you're kind of trying to relax that muscle that you're stretching.
Yeah. So what you did there on the second piece adds an active component to it. Most people are probably not doing that. So the more effective way to stretch, and again, we can get into semantics like, oh, this is mobility and this is stretching. It's all one and the same as long as we're working and using effective techniques. So an active stretch would be to stretch out the joint first and then activate the muscles that you're stretching out. So you're contracting that muscle. So in this aspect, we're stretching out the calf muscles, like you said, the gastroc and the soleus. And then we're going to push our foot down on the gas pedal, which is going to contract those muscles while they're exactly
interesting.
100%. So now you're getting stronger per se and more stable at your joints and range of motion. And you can actually couple that with, so we would hold that for 10 to 20 seconds, that stretched out contraction. And then we could do the muscles on the front side of the ankle, which would be your tibialis anterior. And you would think about taking your foot off of the gas pedal while you're still in the stretch. So essentially the principles are, we first stretch out the joint, then we contract muscles on one side of the joint for a certain period of time, then we relax, and then we contract muscles on the other side of the joint and then relax. So now you're getting stronger in the backside because we're using the calf. We're getting super detailed with this beginning here.
Easy one to illustrate,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the back calf muscles are stretched out and you're contracting. So you're getting strong in that end range of motion. And then on the front side, your muscles are in a shortened range of motion. So now you're getting stronger there as well. And so if we look at research, so the question is like, okay, there's passive stretching and then there's active stretching. Now I call it active stretching just because there's, technical terms for it, end range of motion, isometric contractions. And there's a whole bunch of different, kind of semantics there, which most people don't really need to know. It's just like active stretching and passive stretching. If we look at the research, passive or static stretching, again, which most people are doing. If we take another example outside of the calf, if I were to just pull my arm in front of my chest and kind of pull it in to stretch out the shoulder per se, this would be an example of a passive stretch. Another common example for the listeners here, I'm basically grabbing the front of my ankle and pulling my leg behind me, stretching out my quad. And that's a really common stretch for a lot of people. And that's a passive stretch again. So if we look at the research, passive stretching has been shown to increase injury risk.
I was just going to ask you about that, right?
And decrease performance. So I'm gonna repeat that because that's part of the message that I'm trying to get out there for folks is if you are stretching, we need to be doing effective stretching. So passive or static stretching, again, which most people are doing, unfortunately, is increasing injury risk and decreasing performance when performed before an athletic endeavor or a workout. Now, some people are like, well, I don't work out. And, obviously, hopefully people are working out. But if you're not, life involves active movement, right? So life essentially is a workout to a certain extent. You got to put away your dishes. You've got to grab boxes on the ground. You've got to walk. Maybe you got to run
You do a pistol squat getting out of your car.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So
do you know that's the number one way that people blow hamstring attachments getting out of their cars?
I would, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, we're all weak, usually at the muscular tendinous junction. But yeah, 100%. So it's like if you're going to spend that 10 to 15 minutes on stretching, active stretching is the way to go. Now, is there never a time for passive or static stretching? And my advice to people is if you have 10 to 15 minutes to basically provide your body and your joints with maintenance, because that's all stretching is, right? It's joint maintenance. And you kind of alluded that the front of your shoulders are extremely tight. And my first thing is we got to get you a movement vault account because you're going to see that the active, because that's what we focus on at Movement Vault. We focus on active stretching and muscle activation exercises, which is far different than passive and static stretching. It is far more effective. And so, yeah, we got to get you on that Movement Vault app. But what you'll find is that the stretches that we do, people don't even, there's like, this is way different than the stretching that I've been doing or I'm accustomed to. And yeah, that is the case. We spent over a decade.
But did we not just determine that a passive stretch can be an active stretch just by activating the muscle? You stretch it out. So like you said, people do this to stretch their hamstring, and more people do get injured by stretching before training when they use passive stretch. Wouldn't turning that into an active stretch just have you push down against your hand and like try to pull your foot out of your hand and activate that quad muscle in that position?
100%. Exactly. Yeah. So that's, you can essentially turn any passive hold into an active stretch, just like you said, by contracting muscles. But then on top of that, that's a isometric hold per se. So that means that you're not in any
range, right? You're just holding it there. Yeah.
Yep. So you're not actually moving through the range of motion. So that's a big piece. And then as well as active movement. So we need to activate muscles and move them through their end ranges of motion with actual movement. So like an example of that, one that I really love for the side of the hip, which a lot of people have, hip stability issues, hip mobility issues, is you'd lie on the ground face down and you would essentially bend your knee and your hip such that your leg is kind of out to the side now. And then you would lift that leg up and then you would bring it back straight. It might be a little hard for the listeners.
Yeah, to visualize, but if you go to the App Store, you can download the Movement Vault app. So I think what you're saying is you're almost like a frog, like you're pulling your knee out to the side, right? And so your upper leg is kind of perpendicular to the body, and then the lower leg is kind of coming back in to where your foot is almost touching your knee of the other leg, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And that's gonna get you. It's gonna activate your gluteus medius and all the hip rotator muscles in an elongated or a stretched out position. Because when we look at a muscle or a joint, the muscle can either be in a stretched out position or it can be in a shortened position. So if you think about the bicep, it bends the elbow for the most part. It's its main function. When the elbow is straight, it's essentially, it's maximally stretched out for the most part. I mean, we can get into semantics, stretch out, extend the shoulder, but in general, when we straighten the elbow, it's stretched out. When we bend the elbow maximally, then the bicep is shortened. Now, if we look at strength ranges within that muscle, we're always going to be weaker at the end ranges of motion. That's from a shortened position and a lengthened position. So in a bicep curl, for the listeners, when my elbow is about 90-ish degrees, so the forearms are kind of parallel to the ground, that's where we're going to be our strongest. And we're going to be our weakest right at the top, and we're going to be our weakest at the bottom. And that's like, if you ever perform squats and you're kind of going heavy, you're usually not going to fail on the top of the squat. It's going to be in the hole. Right. Yeah. So when
a lot of it has to do with the geometry of the joints themselves and how the muscles are pulling. By the way, you just pointed out something that's a great bicep workout, and it's called 21s. You do 7 reps at the bottom half of the movement. You do 7 reps from the middle to the top half of the movement, and then you do 7 full reps. And you want to talk about something that'll and do that with the blood flow restriction. You'll thank me later.
You're going to be feeling it the next day for sure.
Yeah, sure. But that's fascinating. So there's a lot of places popping up today that will stretch you. And, we've had massage envy, right? Which sucks. I'm going to go on the record. Do yourself a favor, never sign up for massage envy, because once you get on that merry-go-round, they don't let you off, and they won't let you transfer your credits. And it's really just find yourself a good masseuse and go when you need to go, period. End of story. But what we have popping up now is we have these stretch labs or stretch zones where you go in and they forcefully stretch you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I have seen some of the techniques that they do. I can't, make an overarching statement for every company that is there, because like you said, they're popping up everywhere. But from what I've seen, it is a lot of passive stretching. So another example for the listeners, and this is a stretch that I saw when I was in one of these facilities, is you'll be laying on your back, and the person or the therapist or the stretcher per se.
They call themselves stretchologists.
Okay, the stretchologist. All right. A little branding there. Okay. Yeah. And so they're going to take your straight leg. They're going to take one leg with your knee straight. They're going to bring it up as far as they can. So that's going to stretch out, the hamstrings, the glutes to a certain extent. And then they're just going to kind of hold it there, and they're just going to relax. They're probably going to tell you to breathe. Again, that's a static passive stretch. And so I go back to the research, and not only the research, but the anecdotal evidence I've seen firsthand working with thousands of people. And that's not going to help you become a better mover in life. So even if we take a step aside from the research and we say, okay, so we're doing something passive to try to get better at something active. From a common sense perspective, that just doesn't make sense, and anything that we're doing in life outside of laying down, sitting down is an active endeavor. So that means, if you're washing your dishes, that's active. If you're walking, everything involves some type of joint activation. Not only that, it requires joint proprioception, which is just a fancy word of body awareness, knowing where your body is in space, so you can detect your movement. It takes balance, which is a component of joint stability. And so when you're passive stretching, you're not doing any of that. You're not going to get better at joint stability, joint balance by passively stretching, because again, there's no active component to it. And so if there is a facility and they're just focusing on passive stretching, like the technique that I just kind of stated, yeah, it's essentially.
So could I say to my stretchologist, now resist. I'm going to try to push my leg down. I'm going to resist it, and he lets me push it, and he adds resistance, and I do push it all the way back down till it's parallel with the other leg. So that's a full range. Then that would be a better way to finish that than, okay, I'm done stretching this, relax your leg.
Yeah, 100%. I would say not even spending any time in that passive stretch, except for making sure you're at your end range of motion.
Yeah.
Maybe you can stay there for maybe 5 seconds just to make sure you really are at that end range. And then yeah, there's 2 different ways you could do it. You could have somebody push downward into your hand or into your shoulder if you were holding up that leg, and you can use different intensities. So you could say, let's push down at a 50% muscle intensity, and then over a sequential number of reps, we could go, all right, I want you to push down as hard as you can. This is something I did quite often in the clinic, especially when I was working with NFL guys, just big old linemen, 300 and some pounds. And, I'm sitting up there and holding the leg, and they're just pushing down. And so you would hold that for a given amount of time, say 10 to 20 seconds. And then what we do is, to kind of take the same analogy, then you can contract the muscles on the front side of the hip, such as the hip flexors, and then try to bring your leg even closer upward. So yeah, 100%. Yeah. If somebody was stretching you out and you gave them the cues to, resist you, yep, that's going to turn it into an active stretch. And that's, again,
can I make my weightlifting sessions kind of active stretches if I use, I don't go really, really heavy and crazy, but I focus on full range of motion?
Great question. And that's something that a lot of people unfortunately get wrong. So, it depends on your goals. Number one, I would say that a goal of your training, or just, joint maintenance and body maintenance, would be to have full range of motion and good joint stability and all those great things. But, sometimes if you're more in the bodybuilder world, we're doing people are doing partial reps. So yeah, you hit it right on that. When you're training, I always suggest people utilize their full range of motion when they're doing an exercise, no matter what exercise it is. If it's a pull-up, go down to a dead hang. And the caveat here is your mobility is going to be individual to you on that day. And so, if we take a squat, for instance, right? And somebody is trying to get down to parallel, because, if you don't get down to parallel with your thighs, to parallel to the ground, it's not a squat, which, hey, I always tell people to go down as low as you can while minding your specific joint mobility prerequisites. Now, if you go down to parallel and you are able to maintain good technique, your knees aren't caving in, your heels aren't coming off the ground, don't round the back, then that's a great range of motion for you. But if you're trying to push it such that you get down to parallel, and just like you said, your back rounds, your knees are caving in, your heels are coming up, then you've met your joint restrictions and went past that most likely. So you actually need to train a little bit less range of motion there until you improve your range of motion such that it allows you to go deeper and deeper. And there's no amount of cueing, unfortunately, that if you're working with a trainer one-on-one, or you're listening to the trainer in your head that says, man, I'm just going to go a little deeper. I'm going to keep my back straight. I'm going to keep my knees out. If you have a tight joint, you can't talk your joint out of a tight restriction. It just is what it is, unfortunately. And so that's where, incorporating some active stretching and an effective stretching routine comes into play.
So I guess the prerequisite, if you want to try to use weight as an active stretching movement, you should be using a weight that isn't challenging at all, because you're looking for full range. I mean, look, I've squatted, I've deadlifted for years. Some of my lifts probably look pretty horrible, but the weight that I was using was demanded that my body protect itself. I've torn hamstrings, I've detached muscles, I've done it. I understand what exceeding your range is all about. I've had surgeries because of that. But with that being said, if you can put your ego aside and maybe just put 135 on the bar and sit down until your ass is down by your ankles and stand up with it, and you think, wow, this isn't challenging. It's not supposed to be challenging. What you're trying to do is full range of motion to stretch these muscles. And there's a lot of value in bodybuilding and powerlifting to stretching, and we'll mention this in a minute. But what do you think about that? Like, just go really light and look at the muscle working and see if you're going full range.
100%. Yeah, it's a lot of us are just in such sprint mode when it comes to trying to achieve a goal, or when it comes to working out, adding plates onto the bar, and ensuring that you're using appropriate technique and form is critical for longevity. I mean, there's that. Depending on your goal, are you working out for pure performance all the time, or are you working out for some performance, some longevity, some health? Because at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but I want to still be lifting weights when I'm 80, when I'm 90 degrees, 90 years old.
I'm 65 now. So now all of a sudden that's really important to me because I've injured myself enough and now I have restrictions. I'm going to ask you, I want to see how much we have 3 minutes. I want to take a break early.
Sure.
Because I want to talk about something that probably doesn't get discussed in your discussions, and that is feet.
Oh, it does all the time.
Does it? Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about feet because I dropped a 45-pound plate right on my foot wearing 5 fingers one day, and I damaged the nerve, and over the next year, the foot literally turned into like the gargoyle's claw. And so I've had a botched foot surgery by a doctor who thought he knew what he was doing, but then I had to go back and have another surgery. So my foot is actually 2 inches shorter than it used to be, and it's not very flexible. And I'm learning that people need to pay attention to their feet, take care of them, because there's a lot of joints and a lot of body parts you can work around, but you can't work around feet because you need them. At the end of the day, if you hurt your arm, you can use the other arm. But if you hurt a foot, it's real hard to walk or do anything. So let's talk about the feet. Are there good ways to stretch the feet? What should we do? And that sort of thing. In the meantime, you can go to the website. Here we go. movementvault.com. Will they be directed to the app from the website also?
Yeah, so we've got 2 different kind of platforms, if you will. So movementvault.com, that's kind of just where you're going to learn about Movement Vault in general. And so from there is a link to the App Store app. So for iPhone users, we've got the apps that you can use. You can download from the App Store. But for Android users, you're going to go straight to movementvault.com, and then you're going to sign up there. And we just launched last December, in addition to our iPhone app, is our custom web app. And it's got all the same features and functions as the iPhone app does. So yeah, movementvault.com is a good place to start for both iPhone and Android users, and go from there.
I'm back, and we're going to talk about the app too, because there's some really interesting stuff that they're working on. So we'll be right back with more of Dr. Wickham. Stay tuned. You're watching and listening to Superhuman Radio. Move like you're young again. That's the goal. If you move, you're going to be young. Ben, a young person there. Stay tuned.
Hey guys, it's time to change your underwear, and it's time to change to Sheath. Sheath's underwear's revolutionary designs allows your man parts to hang the way they would naturally hang if you were not wearing underwear. And this improves the blood flow throughout the day to the twigs and berries. If you've never experienced wearing a pair of Sheath underwear, boy, is there an exciting experience waiting for you. Grab a pen and write this down. Go to shrnetwork.biz/sheath. That's SHEATH. And use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 20% off your first pair. And get this, if you're not completely satisfied, Send them back for a full refund. That's shrnetwork.biz/sheath.
Great sleep upgrades you on virtually every level: body fat, muscle mass, mood, brain function, and countless other ways. But taking melatonin alone isn't the answer. Thanks to a brand new sleep formula developed by my friends at Bioptimizers, you can experience the best night's sleep ever. Sleep Breakthrough is a delicious sleep drink that supports your natural melatonin production and relaxation without creating a dependency, so you can have the best night's sleep on demand. It targets 5 different sleep pathways to give you the best sleep ever. And best of all, you'll wake up feeling rested and rejuvenated so that you can have the best day possible. For an exclusive offer for my listeners, go to sleepbreakthrough.com/SHR and use the code SHR10 for 10% off. Plus, you can unlock special gifts with the value of at least $20. This is a limited time offer, so go to sleepbreakthrough.com/SHR right now. Hey, this is Carl Lenore. I am the inventor of Gun Leash. Over 500,000 handguns are lost in the United States every year. If you carry a gun like I do, you are 300 times more likely to lose your gun. And 15% of those guns will end up in criminals' hands and used in the commission of a crime. Gun Leash solves that problem. Gun Leash is a patented, no-tracking proximity device the size of a postage stamp. It will alert you as soon as your gun is outside of your range, so you can never leave your gun behind. To learn more and to be notified when Gun Leash is available at the end of January, go to gunleash.com and get on our mailing list. Gun Leash. Never lose your gun, never leave your gun.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Welcome back. You know, every time I hear the Gun Leash ad, I think we were supposed to launch in January. Here it is, June. This endeavor has been a leapfrog from one obstacle to another. Overcoming obstacles is the way businesses are designed if you want to be successful, because there's too many opportunities to just give up and say, you know what, forget about it. But man, it's been a real learning exercise for me. Because listening to that ad, I was like, we were supposed to go to market in January. Now we're lucky if it's going to happen in July, but we are going to go to market. So stay tuned. Let's talk about feet. What can we do for our feet? Can we stretch our feet? And what's the best way? They become so stiff after a while, even as you get older.
Yeah. So there's a few different components there. So we have a saying in Movement Vault, right? Like in the bodybuilding and just kind of the workout community, there's the saying, don't skip leg day. Mm-hmm. So we say, which, I mean, we love that as well. You know, you gotta work those legs. Right. But we say, don't skip feet day. So within Movement Vault, we work on every joint in the body, whether it's the neck, the shoulders, the upper back, core musculature, inside of the hip, everything. And feet is extremely important as well. And just like you said, even stepping back, we didn't really touch on this. A point that I like to educate people on: our body becomes the positions that we spend the most time in. So even if we take a step back and say, like, well, why do we even need to stretch? What does stretching do? Obviously, we talked about, improving your active range of motion. And on top of that, it's undoing all of the things that we've done to our
repetitive. Yeah.
Exactly. So if we're sitting at our desk and I'm kind of hunched over right now, my upper back is
Elisa keeps telling me, sit up straight. It's true. You get used to being like this.
Yep. The neck's forward, we're using a backrest. So that's another piece. People are using backrest way too much, which is essentially doing the job that our core musculature is doing. We can talk about that more on kind of low back pain. I think that's a great topic, but specifically the feet. Now, if we go back, most people are wearing shoes today, and we started wearing shoes when we were, 1 year old, 2 years old, etc. Well, most of these shoes, number one, are not designed and fitting like our feet should fit. They have narrow toe boxes. So the front of the shoe is basically constricting the front of our feet just due to fashion. That's going to change over the years. Basically the formation of our feet, because our body adapts to the positions that we spend the most time in. And these adaptations, whether it's the upper back being rounded, the shoulders jutting forward, it's not going to happen in a day, a week, a month, or even a year. This is just repetition over the years and decades. And so the feet will change, number one, due to the shoe structure, Number two, we've got these huge chunks of foam on the bottom of our feet at all times, right? Which we need because we've got, streets and hard things that we're walking on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So if we look at the receptors in the hands and the feet, there's some of the most dense population of receptors in the whole body. So a receptor is essentially, a branch of the nervous system that's going to take in information and give it to your spinal cord and your brain, process that information, and then it's going to send an output to your muscles, to your joints, to have some type of action. It's called a feedback loop. We're getting information in, we're going to process that information, we're going to send information out. And so if we think about our hands, right, and extremely tactile, we can pick up a lot of information by touching things, whether it's heat, whether it's sharp, how that feels. Well, our feet have just as many receptors, if not more, than our hands. And so if we look at the brain and the amount of space in this part of the brain called the homunculus, the feet and the hands, the bottom, the palms of the feet and the hands are the biggest areas. So they give us the most information. Now, if we're wearing shoes for, we'll say 14 hours a day, some type of padding or some type of structure on the bottom of the feet, that's dumbing down our receptors throughout the day. Now, if we do that for years and years and years, that's going to downregulate some of those receptors. They're going to get less good at what they should do. And the analogy I like to use is just imagine wearing gloves for 16 hours a day for 30, 40, 20 years. Do you think you're going to have as good of feeling on your hands? Well, you're not, unfortunately. And so you got the tight shoes, you've got the cushy shoes, which is taking out the receptors. All this stuff is leading to, like you said, poor foot function. And unfortunately, in your case, you dropped a plate on your foot. So there's definitely some things.
Well, and the surgeries were really the problem. I mean,
just the bot surgery. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the first surgery, the doctor used an approach that had been abandoned by foot surgeons 10 years earlier because it always failed. So yeah, it's the way it is in life,
Yeah, different levels to different any occupation, unfortunately. But yeah, going back to the feet, it's going to be similar principles to any other joint maintenance in your body, and so it's focusing on active mobility. We'll actually throw in some muscle and fascia release work as well. So the fascia, listeners might be aware of or heard of plantar fasciitis, which can be extremely painful, pain in the bottom of the feet and the heel. And essentially the fascia is one of the connective tissues that runs on the bottom of the feet and runs throughout your body. That can be extremely tight. It can be, inflamed. There can be micro kind of tears.
Well, a lot of times what happens with plantar fasciitis is that the bone starts to grow out to stay attached to the fascia because you've done something where you've overextended that joint and the fascia kind of pulled away and then the bone literally grows out. So you're every time you step down, you're stepping down on like this little pyramid of bone. It's like now you have a rock in your sock. Now, the funny thing about that is one of the ways that they resolve plantar fasciitis is actually, like most overuse injuries, soft tissue is avascular, so it's reluctant to heal. So you have to keep kind of doing these small injuries over and over again. Like they'll do injections, dry needling, stuff like that, to make the body pay attention. Hey, you didn't finish fixing this. And I had plantar fasciitis, and I was in Florida, and it was every morning I would wake up so painful to even start walking. And then as you start walking, the micro tears would break up again, and you'd be able to move. But then when you went to sleep, laying all night long with not moving your heel, boom, it would be back in the morning. I got up and I went out to the seashore, not where it's the wettest, but where it's semi-dry sand, but right there. And I was so pissed off that my foot hurt, and I was on a vacation, that I started to drive the heel into the sand and cursing because I was so angry and aggravated. It was gone the next day. And that's where I learned about there's certain things that clinicians will do. Like when you have tendinitis, they'll go and dig in there. It'll hurt like a son of a bitch. But by digging into it, it makes the body pay attention to it, and it forces it to heal. It was fascinating to me. Very fascinating.
Yeah, essentially, there's different. They'll use that in surgery as well, like micro abrasions. So that's going to increase blood flow to that area. But when it comes to the plantar fasciitis, like you were saying, that bone spur, which is essentially like a sharp little point that does just grow, that's an adaptation, just like we talked about. So your body adapting to things.
Right.
Now, a couple different reasons that can happen. Now, your foot, you might have been born per se with quote unquote flat feet, right? Or you could have been born on the other end of the spectrum where you have a really high arch.
Right.
Now, way too many people are relying on orthotics and foot support because they don't have the adequate mobility and stability. They can't even connect their brain to those intrinsic foot muscles. So the person with flat feet, we just need to improve that activation in those foot muscles, because your muscles are perfectly capable of creating an arch for you. Does it have to be an extremely high cupped arch? No, it doesn't. It just needs to be, functional such that you can walk around and you're, not flattening like a pancake. Now that's going to take some time doing, appropriate exercises, muscle activation stuff. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the person with the extremely high arch, some of that is due to bone structure per se. But when we optimize, all of those bones and all of those joints in the foot, there's a ton of different joints in the foot that articulate together. Then, you don't have to rely on that, that arch support. And I see way too many people when it comes to plantar fasciitis. There's only a handful that I can think of off the top of my head cases where I wasn't able to fully restore somebody's plantar fasciitis and essentially get them on.
What you're talking about is restoring the being prone to it. I mean, I fixed an acute problem, but I was never prone to it, so it never came back. But what you're saying is looking at the foot structure and addressing what makes that person prone to it and correcting that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, either preventative or actually retroactive when somebody does have pain. Because I've seen some, just like you, people that were came into my clinic. I had a clinic in New York City for quite a while. They would come in and they're just limping and they're in really rough shape, and they're to the point where, man, should I get surgery? And if we do the right things, whether it's muscle and fascia release techniques with a mobility ball, if we're digging in there with our hands, if you're seeing a manual therapist, and then incorporating active stretches. So when it comes to the feet, we need to work on the ankles. We need to work on the big toe. So that's a piece that a lot of people are missing. And if we assess the big toe, we want to see a certain amount of extension. That's like if you were looking down at your feet and you tried to bring your big toe up off of the ground. Right. We want to see a decent amount of extension there. There's a certain number we want to see, but if you don't have a control of your big toe to lift it up, that would be active mobility or even passive flexibility in the big toe, then you're going to have some big problems up the chain. That's a principle called regional interdependency. So your big toe is going to affect your ankle, which is going to affect your knee, which is going to affect your hip, which is going to affect your low back. Everything's connected. And if you have one weak link in that kinetic chain, well, that's going to demand compensation from another joint.
Right.
And if one joint's not doing its job, say in this aspect, the big toe, well, that can cause knee pain. And that's not a joint that a lot of people are thinking when they have knee pain. And I like to say that, when you have knee pain, it's usually not the knee's fault. It's usually you have poor hip mobility and stability, poor ankle and or big toe mobility or stability. And so when we're walking, we're doing any kind of locomotion, which is movement using our legs. The big toe is like where everything starts. So if you don't, when you're taking a step, the foot and back needs to have that big toe extension. If it doesn't,
I learned this the hard way because of what happened to my foot. When I stand up, if I don't concentrate on making my left big toe, the great toe as they call it, plant into the ground, I can feel that I can't extend my back far enough. It starts in my foot. And it's really fascinating that you're talking about this, because since I've had this problem with my foot, I remember texting a friend of mine and saying, I'm willing to bet that most of the lower back problems that people have today are because of weak calves, because they can't purchase the ground, so to speak, properly and push down with the pads of their feet as they stand up. And so all of a sudden they're trying to stand up on their heels, and the lower back flattens out to compensate for that. And it's like you end up with back problems.
Yeah, I love how you said that they can't purchase the ground. Yeah, it's 100%. Yeah, you need to have that connection. You need to when your big toe is extremely strong for the size of it, and the muscles are pretty small comparison to your like lat muscles or your gluteus muscles, but extremely important. So I definitely urge the listeners, if you're not, it doesn't matter if you're not in pain or have injury right now. It's all about being proactive with your mobility, and the big toe in the foot is extremely important.
What about so our foot does this all day long, right?
Mm-hmm.
It bends this way, but it rarely bends this way. What about that exercise, like try to pick up a towel with your foot? I had a friend, Perry, that used to fold the front of his foot under like that when he would sit. He just naturally did it. But what about paying attention to the foot flexion in the opposite direction than this direction?
Really important. So every range of motion, every way that joint can move. And if there's muscles on one side of the joint, then yeah, we should spend time not only actively stretching them, but actually, actively strengthening them as well. And so, yeah, you're 100%. A couple different ways you can do that. You could do that standing. So I'm standing right now while we talk here. I could just curl my toes underneath me. Right. So I'm essentially, I've got one leg just planted on the ground. My other leg, my knees bent, and my toes are curled, underneath me. There's a couple different things I could do. Once they're maximally stretched, because I'm using the ground to maximally stretch them, I could squeeze them even more, trying to almost bring my toes toward the bottom of my feet, and I could squeeze that hard. And then I can do the opposite. I can extend all of my toes and my big toe.
I feel that in the arch. When I do that, I feel the arch. The arch is really the predominant muscle that I feel. I've got my heels on the ground and I'm rolling my toes under. The left foot doesn't want to do it because the toe is fused, but the muscles are still activating. And I feel that in the bottom of my feet, but especially the arch. So I'm really activating the arch when I do that.
Yeah. I mean, all those muscles are important. Now I would say, if you were just, when you say your arch, when you're doing the curl inward,
when I'm doing the curl, I'm doing this with my toes. I'm doing this with my toes, but I'm doing it extreme. Like I'm putting my feet out so they're on the heels. Actually, they're in sneakers, but I have enough room to push, and I can feel my toes pushing down on the bottom of the sneakers. And as I do that, I can feel the muscles around the arch and the arch itself flexing. That's the predominant muscle flexing.
So you're creating that foot arch that, these shoes, as we rely on these big arches in our shoes, that essentially takes the job away from the muscles of the foot. And so after time, again, it goes back to your body adapting. And over time, there's two things that happen. You lose that mind muscle connection, which is kind of an old school bodybuilding term, but it's true. You need to be able to connect and contract certain muscles, but also those muscles become weak and unstable. And so, yeah, 100%, you're contracting muscles that probably aren't used to contracting in that range of motion as much.
We're going to take our last break. When we come back, we talk about the back, because obviously everybody has back problems. I'll share mine. I mean, my audience probably knows already, but we'll talk about that. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Dr. Grayson Wickham. And go fast. There we go.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
There are lots of concerns about food supply today. That's why you need White Oak Pastures. White Oak Pastures will deliver food right to your doorstep. You don't even have to go out and be disappointed by shopping in grocery stores. The finest beef, pork, lamb, duck, and more can be found at White Oak Pastures. And now they even have seafood. And best of all, White Oak Pastures has a negative carbon footprint, which means that you don't have to feel guilty for eating your ribeye. Go to shrnetwork.biz/white oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 15% off. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. BPC is one of the most amazing supplements you can use. It's been shown to increase the speed of recovery, heal the gut, and do so many other things. BPC stands for Body Protection Compound, and it's a naturally occurring peptide in the body. Used by professional athletes and weekend warriors alike, there has always been an obstacle in the way of average people using BPC, and that is it was injectable only. Not any longer, thanks to NutriNeeds. We now have oral BPC, and it works. Go to shrnetwork.biz/NutriNeeds, NutraNeeds. Use the code SHR and save 10% off your bottle of BPC. Feel better, recover faster, train harder. NutriNeeds.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back. So we're going to talk about the back because it really is probably most people today have back problems, probably from sitting all day long or most of their day. So what can we do for the back? I remember the psoas became so popular a couple years ago. Now they have the hip hook, but a lot of the back problems really occur because we sit all day long and these muscles in front shorten, huh?
Yeah. So, kind of digging in on that point that you said, if we look at statistics, the number one reason that you're going to visit your general practitioner, your doctor, is due to back pain. And it's extremely unfortunate. And even there was a study that showed that 80% of the population in the US will have back pain bad enough, or I should say extreme enough, to see their doc at some point in their life. And even more unfortunate, of those 80%, 90% will then go back at least, twice. So they'll have back pain bad enough to see their doc 2 or more times throughout their lifetime. And I always say 90% of the injuries that, came to see me as a doctor of physical therapy could be avoided. And that comes down to, again, this proactive joint maintenance, this joint health in the form of an effective stretching routine. And just like you said, back pain, it's extremely common, should be avoided, should be preventable. And it comes down to the chair, like you said, sitting. And so we kind of touched on it at the beginning. Couple different things going on sitting. Now, number one is just we're not active. So, we're essentially passive, which is okay. We need times as humans where we're not moving. We're, kind of resting and relaxing. It's not like we have to be in motion for the 16 hours a day that we're awake. But most people, if they add up the amount of time that you're sitting in a day, or
it's 16 hours. They're sitting for 16 hours, right?
Exactly. So if we add up the amount of time that you're not moving, so that includes sitting or laying down, even including a workout. If you do work out, say you work out an hour a day, or you run or do whatever you do, you walk for an hour, people are only moving throughout their day for a couple hours, 2-3 hours a day. And that includes, getting up, going to the refrigerator, back down to the couch, walking to your car, walking back from your car. So all this time, is spent just not moving, and sitting again is one of those forms of not moving. And most people, when they're sitting, they're using the backrest. And so when you're when you're sitting using the backrest, now your whole core musculature doesn't have to do its job. And so the core musculature job is to essentially keep your spine safe and stable. And there needs to be a certain amount of activation there. And so you need to be able to connect to those spinal muscles or those core muscles. And so the core muscles are not just the 6-pack abs, right? So they're the muscles that wrap all around the back. So they're the quadratus lumborum and the spinal erector muscles and the obliques and everything around it. And so when we use these back rests, we're not having to do our job. We lose touch of the muscles and they become weak, kind of like the analogy we use with the feet. And so that's a huge piece right there. And when I work with people, one-on-one, or, we hear from users in the Movement Fold app, it's like just like retraining their brain to be able to contract and activate certain spinal muscles is like a huge game changer. And so not only that, but you alluded to our hips are in a shortened position. So they're at a 90-degree angle, essentially, for the most part. The hips are and the knees are. And so that's going to put the hip flexors, like you said, the psoas, and the back of the legs, the hamstrings, in a shortened position as well.
And then they pulled it, they tilt the pelvis, right? So what they do is they pull the pelvis forward, and the arch that's supposed to be at the tail of the spine disappears, and you have that flat back, which is antithetical to what happens. It kind of flattens out the discs in lumbar, L4, L5, S1, which everybody has. So it's fascinating that most of our back problems are coming from not using our legs. Because I've had Dr. Stu McGill on the show a few times. He talks about the number one thing you can do for your back is walk, ambulate. That's the best thing for your lumbar spine, is just to walk. Nobody walks anymore. I mean, let's be honest, right? So
yeah, any type of movement is going to be great. Now, I would say Stu's great. I mean, his body of work is amazing and impressive. And so, yeah, when it comes to movement, is walking going to be enough? Yeah, it's going to be a huge step for so many people. Just getting it out there and move. But walking just happens in the sagittal plane of motion. So the sagittal plane is just a fancy term for going straight. So our body moves in 3 main planes of motion. So straight, forward, which is most things we do: walking, bench pressing, push-ups, squatting, all the stuff that most people are doing in the gym. Also side to side movement, and also rotational movement. And so specifically rotational movement is something that most people aren't doing enough in their daily activities and or in their workouts in the gym. And so when you're not using these rotator muscles around your midsection, around your hip, that's going to over time cause some adaptation, and you're going to get less mobile and less stable in those muscles, which are then going to increase your chances for injury risk. And, I've heard it all the time. I'm a big person comes in to see me. They're a big CrossFitter, or say even, coming from your world, the powerlifting world. It's like, I can deadlift, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 pounds. But then when I bent over and twisted to pick up the box, or I bent over and, try to pick up my child who's 10 pounds, I heard a pop. And next thing you know, I'm the guy that's deadlifting 600, but I can't lift up, a 10-pound object while we rotate. And people are like, well, you should never bend down and rotate and pick something up. Well, I'm pretty sure humans have been doing that pretty much since humans have been humans. Now, should you bend down and twist and pick something up that's 500 pounds? Well, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. But picking up relative
10-pound baby, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like that person was really strong in that one plane of motion, but once we got them out of that plane, they were extremely fragile. Right. And that's soul crushing to some people that, are really like passionate about being strong. And so I say that you need to be mobile and strong in all ranges of motion. And, part of the back pain equation is, walking is great, but we really need to get some varied motion in there. And so rotational movement is key. And so part of a back pain proactive to prevent back pain or fix back pain is incorporating rotational work. And that could be with body weight. It could be with bands. It could be with even some light, kettlebell stuff, weights in general.
So if someone goes and gets the app, what can they expect to see and use? What does the app provide?
Yeah, so it's essentially the kind of one-liner is Movement Vault is a better way to stretch, prevent, and fix pain and injury. And so it's going to help you, again, prevent all the stuff that we talked about. Because some people are like, well, I'm not in pain, I don't really need to stretch. Well, your body's resilient, and fortunately and unfortunately, we can get away with a lot until we can't. And so once we can't anymore, then things, for lack of better words, aren't too good. And so the app, yeah, you're going to go into it. Most users, we've got a new daily class every day. So it's anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes long. You get in there, you do the daily class. It could focus on one area of the body, such as the feet. It could focus on one or two or three, such as the upper back, shoulders. It could be a full body day. And so most users do that daily class every day. And it's new. So we, over the month, you're going to hit
like a video class.
Exactly. Yep. It's a video follow along class. And again, it's going to be different than the stretching that you're used to. It's going to be different than, really any other app or program out there, because this program has been iterated over the last decade. And again, is founded by research, but then has been experimented upon in my practice and some of the other smart doctors of physical therapy that have collaborated on this. And so, outside of the daily class, you can filter, you can search. If say today is a foot day, but you really want to work on your hip, you can filter out through 1,500 other plus classes that we have in there. And we've got other classes to choose from as well, such as pre-workout. We've got recovery routines. In the app, we've got a custom routine builder, so you can kind of get really granular and actually build your own routine utilizing our really extensive exercise library. There's over 1,000 different active stretches and muscle activation, muscle and fascia release techniques in there, as well as complete programs. So we've got complete, start to finish programs. We have a low back pain program. It's a 16-week program that starts you on week 1 and progresses you throughout those 16 weeks as if you were coming to see me, so we've got to start off at this point, progress you to get you to that point. And we also have a neck pain program. We're releasing our knee pain. And so we're continually adding new routines and content to the app. And so I
was busy downloading the Movement Vault app and I wasn't paying attention to and now I can open it and go to it. Oh,
yeah. Yeah. We'll get those shoulders and those feet working better than they have. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate this. This is great. I'm gonna start using it right away because I really do need to. I sit too much, and I don't move enough. I know I don't. Mark Bell keeps yelling at me. You got to do more cardio, and I agree with him. And
that's the beauty of Movement Vault. It's again, this stuff is we've kind of taken the guesswork out for you. So again, going back to that, a lot of people are spending time on static stretching. Well, I hate to break the news, but it's not effective. So it doesn't take an hour to do your stretching, 10 to 20 minutes. Do it before your workout. Do it, whenever you can slice out a little bit of time, and you're gonna feel the difference. And we have users that even try one routine and they're like, "Wow, I feel a ton better," and that's way different than anything I was doing. And so, I definitely guarantee it'll change your life.
There it is. I've just created a password, and I'll finish this up right now. We're gonna end the show. Again, those of you who want to improve the quality of your life, and that's what anti-aging medicine is all about. This doesn't take any drugs, but it does take a skilled approach to stretching and mobility work. You can go to movementvault.com, or you can go to the Apple App Store, like I just did, and search for Movement Vault app and download it and get started today. Thanks for being on the show today, Dr. Wickham.
Carl, this has been amazing. And thanks for having me on. And hopefully, your users can take at least a nugget or many nuggets, take that back into their lives. And this low back pain, foot pain, joint replacements should essentially almost not exist. So hopefully the users will take some of these nuggets and bring them back into their lives. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see everybody soon. I'm sure we have another show. I don't know if we have another show this week. I don't think we do. I think this is the only one. I've been cutting back on my shows because my workload is just too much with Gun Leash. But that's going to change soon, because soon I won't even be on the air anymore, and then you'll miss me. All right, we'll see everybody soon. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. Don't hate us because we feel good.